Hello, in this section, I will tell you about the changes in AngularJS version 1.3, which was released in October of 2014. So it really won't affect this course, considering that I'm not using any features that change significantly, although you might see some difference in the ng model options and ng messages, which I have used in this course to basically touch upon what has changed. So for the summary, here are the main differences: one-time bindings, node package manager, ng model options, which are ways to fine-tune how your data is presented, and ng messages is for validation of input, ng-aria is for accessibility, and the last part is the dropping of Internet 8 Explorer support. And let's start to go over these specifically. So one-time bindings are also known as one-time expression. So how they work is they have a digest and watch, and those are things internal in AngularJS. And when you click on an input that has an ng model, your output is presented in directives such as ng repeat, and normally it continues to update and watch for changes in the input. However, with the one-time binding, it only does it one time. So once that data is displayed from the controller or your ng model, it will be there permanently and won't be changed. The good thing about that is performance, because ng models use the digest, which is something that if you have many, they will slow down the performance. So this is a good performance optimization. And another way to do this is if you were going to create two-way data binding, and then after some specific logic, you would set scope that destroy on that ng model. And this part, the new feature is having AngularJS in the node package manager. So if you're familiar with the command line workflow using npm installer, you can now simply install or set your new project using npm install Angular, and that started with version 1.3. and as you can see, there have been many downloads recently, and I strongly suggest using command line generation to create your new projects. ng model options. This is a way to fine-tune how your models and data is changed. So normally a good example is a search bar, and using autocomplete, each time you may type a letter, you will have in the back the data being fetched. So if by each letter change you don't want to have many get calls or AJAX calls to get data, so with this ng model options allows you to change that. Update on is one thing you can do, so the default setting would be blur, and with browser, the blur event is when the user changes from being focused, having the keys being pressed on a specific input, and then when you click away from that input, it would invoke the event blur. And debounce is a way to have that data, another way to have it delayed. So this has a delay of 500 milliseconds. ng messages, that's another new directive, and how that works is specifically with forms and validation, and you can see your results with the error object as well as the properties pristine, dirty, valid, and invalid. In my course, I go over some styling which will show how validation is performed using styles specifically. So for programming logic or having custom validation, ng messages allows you to fine-tune those controls. An example of this is that support of all HTML5 input properties and attributes. So these input types, as you can see, would be equivalent to their object in the ng model that you can apply your own specific logic. And these are the attributes for validation. So you can have your required, minimum length, max length, min number, max number, if it's an integer input, and then a specific pattern value. So each of those allow you custom logic onto the ng model object. And ARIA is the accessibility of web content, and that helps with companies that support your accessibility of web content by screen readers and such. And the specific attributes that are supported are the ones listed here. Checked, value min, value max, value now, invalid, required. Those are attributes that are going to be helpful when your project requires to include better accessibility of your application. And finally, the drop of IE8 support. This means that specifically jQuery is used inside AngularJS, and part of that no support is because jQuery 2's version 2 dropped support for IE8, and therefore since your AngularJS is using jQuery, then it also doesn't have support for IE8 to start from version 2 of jQuery. If you specifically need to use your Angular application in version 1.3, you have to do some additional work, which includes creating these polyfills for object.create and object.getProperty of. The additional change is you cannot use this style expression. You have to use ng style. And another part is the name spacing. So for the directives, you have to have a specific namespace, such as this one. And if you're using less than or equal to IE8, you have to create these specific element tags inside your HTML. And that about wraps it up for the changes that are major for the version 1.3 release. I will include links for these sources for additional information, including a migration guide if you're migrating your application. But as I mentioned, this course, you don't need, we're not going over any significant changes, so it's not necessary to apply what you learned in this specific lesson. It's just good to know, good to remember for anything you create in the future. So thanks for watching.